This tutorial is all about glazing and how to get the best results using glaze, focusing on Amaco's Crystaltex Glazes. If you love learning about art, support this public school teacher's side hustle and subscribe. First, you're going to need bisqueware, and bisqueware is a piece of clay that has been fired in the kiln once. I'm using low fire clay, so this has been fired at kiln 04. I like to use Amaco's Crystaltex Glazes because you don't have to have really fine attention to detail. The crystals you see in the bottom of the glaze here, when they're fired, they burst into beautiful color, and so the results are usually excellent. There are some that I prefer more than others, and you can see I am shaking this so that all the crystals that set at the bottom can kind of be mixed up. You're going to want to stir this very well. This will not look beautiful. This will not have that vibrant color and the effect of the crystals if you don't get a nice even spread. Now, this glaze is really thick. This is the first time I'm using it, and it has sat on my shelf for about 6 months. So you could add a little bit of water, but you don't want to just use that. You're going to use water, and then you're going to also use a gum solution, which I don't have. So I'm just going to use it thick, which I know there's some pitfalls to that, and I'll show you like what can happen if your glaze is too thick as we proceed. The right brush makes a big difference, and I bought a set of ceramic brush detail sets from Blick Art Materials, and also this bamboo brush works really well. That came in my Jack Richardson set of clay tools. And again, I'll put all of my favorite materials in my description box. So I'm taking my chunky glaze and I'm going to apply my first coat. You can see it does spread into the cracks, and I'm going to make sure that I'm applying a pretty even coat. The first coat's pretty thin, and you do have to wait for it to dry between each coats, which students love to rush that. I don't know if you've ever put on fingernail polish or paint and you're trying to do a second coat before the first coat dries, and all it's doing is like pushing the first coat around. So patience is key with glazing, and although this glaze is chunky in the bottle, once I'm pushing it down into the cracks and crevices, it really is laying nice and flat. I'm going to show you what happens if your glaze is too thick. You'll see it start to crack, and you'll see the end result as well. But for my purposes today, I'm getting a really nice result so far. If you've never glazed before, the glaze the glaze procedure can be a little bit stressful because you really have no idea how it's going to look. A good rule of thumb is to do test glazes and really check to see, how many layers makes it look really nice. How does it look over your clay? For example, I'm using white clay, but I also love to use red, and that result with the glaze is always different. So test glazes are important, but I didn't do any because I'm lazy, because I didn't have time, because I'm a public school teacher. Whatever excuse you want to choose, I'll give it to you. And I just kind of went with it because I have used this brand before. You can see I'm rotating my clay, and I have something laid down so that I don't get glazed on the table. Glazing can be surprisingly messy, and if you're wondering why I mysteriously am working faster, I sped things up since you were just watching me repeat my steps. You can see I'm pushing my brush into the cracks and crevices, into all the textures and carved details that I added. Now, my piece of clay is going to be challenging to glaze because you can see inside of it. So right now I'm just focusing on the outside of this clay coil pot. But as I continue, I have to think about what does it look like on the inside of the clay pot too, which, spoiler alert, I do a terrible job glazing that. And you'll see what happens if you don't pay attention to those details, or you're in a rush like I was when I glazed this on a Friday, needing it ready for Monday. Going back with my brush and covering all the nooks and crannies, making sure to get each spot with a nice coat. Now let's zoom in and look at the crystals. Nice crystal buildup in all those areas, and so those are going to bloom or fire into beautiful bursts of color. So I want to make sure that I use them as much as possible. Here are some more examples. This is Sea Mist, so you can see it's a beautiful blue with some speckles of darker and lighter blue. She did a great job of getting enough crystals to make a really beautiful work of art. This is Snowfire. It reminds me of Fruity Pebbles, and this one has a white base, so all of those bright blooms of crystals really contrast the white base. This student used two. He did Jet Moss, and this one is a little darker with some speckles of gray and a little bit of yellow. And then I love this top. This is Nutmeg. Why is this making me think of a chocolate chip muffin? And I really like the natural glazes. I think that works really well. He's great with choosing colors. I think this one has really great results. So that's kind of what the goal is to get 3 solid opaque coats and to make sure the crystals are spread out so that it's not just one base color of glaze to get that glossy finish, but also to make sure that the burst of color really stands out. I do like this brand because sometimes it's hard to glaze details, and this does the work for you as long as it's a piece of art that looks good multicolored. Like the clay lanterns that my students did, I think it's a great choice. You can see that I'm glazing the inside, and I'm going to be perfectly honest, I was rushing that. Is it difficult to glaze the inside of something? Yes, of course, because it's harder to get to. Just because it's harder to get to and it's more challenging doesn't mean it's not important. And I did rush my steps. I'm kind of swiping my brush aimlessly. Again, I did this on a Friday. And so you want to take your time to make sure that you get a good coat on the inside too. Glazing the bottom of your pot is something to really think about. So, glaze is a glass coating that if put just directly on a kiln shelf, it will stick to the kiln just like the glaze is sticking to the clay. So I'm going to put one layer, and I'm going to make sure none of the crystals are on the bottom because those are very unpredictable in how they flow in the kiln. The reason why I do that is I don't want the bottom to look completely undone. I don't want it to look naked, but I also don't want to add so much that it might flow and ruin the kiln that I share with 3 other art teachers. There's lots of different ways to do this. It depends on your preference. You could do 3 coats, you could do none, but I like to do 1 just so it doesn't look bare. Time to wait for it to dry before you add your second coat. Yep, feels dry to me, so I will be applying my second coat. I always wait, well, I shouldn't say always, I am guilty of rushing things, but to really get a good glaze application, wait for it to dry, put it in front of a fan, do it in another class period, so that you know that you're actually getting a true second coat. As you can see, again, I have sped things up quite a lot as you see me repeat my steps. Speaking of repeating my steps, I'm going to apply a third coat once the second coat has dried. So I'm going to point out some things here. Because the glaze is so thick, there are some areas where the glaze is cracking. And there's a couple reasons for that. 1, I think I put the second and third coat on too thick. And 2, it's cracking because of how thick the glaze is, which I could have watered it down. So let me zoom in here, kind of slowly show you. Really nice thick application of glaze on the outside. The inside's a different story. So you can see the glaze is cracking right there. I could have added a little bit more, but let's just kind of see what happens. So now I'm loading the kiln, and because I glazed my bottom even just once, I'm going to use a stilt to make sure it doesn't stick to the shelf of my kiln. You can see over to the left-hand side that that's some glaze that has dripped and all the firings passed, and I have lots of stuff in here. So do a couple other teachers. I'm gonna close it, and I'm firing it to cone 06. Here we go, here's the finished look. Don't worry about how my fingernail polish matches my glaze, and that is a really nice finished result. So let's kind of investigate what this looks like. You can see I have my candle down in there because this is my clay lantern. Where the clay cracked, it did leave some blank areas where you can kind of see the clay body instead of the glaze. But overall, it's a really nice application. The blue crystals show up really well. Inside, you can see I didn't do such a great job of glazing. It's not the end of the world, but I wish I would have taken more time. The bottom is pretty good. I probably could have actually put a second coat on there without any issue because this glaze did not flux or drip or run as much as it could have. So that's good to know for next time. And this is the finished result. So here it is in the dark with an LED candle. So if you're interested in this lesson plan, how to make a coil lantern, I'll put the link in the description box. And you can see the beautiful cast light, how the glaze just makes it shiny. It makes it waterproof. It just makes it look finished and high quality. Thank you so much for sticking around and making art with me. And if you're interested in more clay tutorials, check these out. Find me on Instagram at thatartteacher_Machado to see what my students are up to in my classroom. And find my lesson plan at thatartteacher.com, and I'll put some student examples of other Crystaltex glazes that you did not see in this video.